Hey folks, got a question for you. Is multiculturalism good? Ooh, talk about a hot potato. America's been called the melting pot for all people, cultures, and countries around the world. This is a two-part series, by the way. But is multiculturalism good? More importantly, is it biblical? Today, I'm going to start in this part one to show you through the scriptures that the gathering of many cultures in one place, or multiculturalism, can be beautiful. But it can only be good under the federal headship of the Lord Jesus Christ in the long run. So let's get started. Everybody, welcome back to Reason for Truth. Host Stevie Garofalo, Reason for Truth. Truth always comes first. Then we give you the reasons, but we're always and constantly learning, because we stop learning, we stop teaching, we at least stop teaching well. Listen, America's being called the melting pot. Melting pot for all people, cultures, countries around the world. But is multiculturalism good? More importantly, is it biblical? We just asked that question. And this series, I'm going to seek through looking through the scriptures to answer that question. A gathering of many cultures in one place, or multiculturalism, I think can be beautiful. I have friends from all over the world, and to one federal headship of Jesus Christ. I always said, I don't really care what color that United States of America turns. I don't care if it's brown, black, green, yellow. My big thing is I want it to be under the federal headship of Jesus Christ, because that's a different story. Each country, let me tell you something, all other countries, they don't have anything like we have here. We say that's a beautiful thing, but that it could also be a destructive thing, because your constitution, your laws, or we're going to talk about that, fall under one set of values. That's a big issue. Britannica.com, you always got to look at what it says, in an article by Jennifer T. Egan, last updated July 19, 2024, that's this year, that's being recorded, defines multiculturalism as such. It's the view that cultures, races, and ethnicities, particularly those of minority groups, you see it's getting political, deserve special acknowledgement, I don't think that's correct, of their differences within dominant political culture. That's a political answer. That's not what multiculturalism is at all. That's a question of how you might handle multiculturalism. So you can see that reference is very dishonest in its entry, and it's very inaccurate. It's very untruthful. Multiculturalism just means the guy next to me is Asian. I'm Italian background, I'm American. Next guy's Hispanic. But he's from Mexico, but he's directly off the boat. The other person is his parents were off the boat, or we walked over or whatever, came in, and he's born here. They look at each other differently. That's the difference between like Hispanic and Chicano if you go to the West Coast. So all cultures see it that way. And the one big problem with this definition, by the way, that I just read, is the point that newcomers to the culture or country somehow deserve special acknowledgement. What is that about? No one deserves anything special. Everybody deserves to be treated well, rightly, honest, and, but that doesn't mean anybody goes to the top, anybody's given anything. Such a definition serves only to destroy the existing culture and refill that space with those of cultures that don't deserve. You say, well, really, Steve, they don't deserve? Right, yeah, they haven't worked for it. They haven't put anything in. Listen, you don't get to take money out of the bank account unless you put it in the first place. And that's why I'm not a big fan of most pensions, because people didn't put in. They're asking the taxpayer to say that. That's going to sit unfavorable with a lot of people. And in many cases, Social Security that's not given to those who put in. It's not fair for those who put in, right? They have to give it to those who don't put anything in, right? We wouldn't go to the stock market and ask to take dividends or distributions or profit on stock if we never invested, took that risk, right? So what's the difference between that and any other handout? Anyways, I'm not going to get into that. An example of such a thing is really the U.S. government's granting of tens of thousands of dollars to non-citizens. That's another way to look at it. And I don't want to get into make it too political, but the bottom line is, when you become more political than you do compassionate, you end up harming people, not helping them learn how to provide for themselves. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. I was raised in the Washington, D.C. area. I was born to an immigrant. My dad came here legally on Ellis Island, had to have papers, had to have a sponsor, him, his dad, and his family, his mom and his brothers and his sister. And that's the way it went. New York City and Washington, D.C. are very, very multicultural. I kind of didn't know anything other than that. I came to Charlotte, North Carolina in the late 90s. It was different. It was interesting. It was actually pretty peaceful. But it was also less multicultural. So growing up in these cities has given me a very federal headship. I'm used to the federal government, feel comfortable with the federal government over at least the years past. And, I'm used to a whole conglomerate of different multicultural people. But I also went to church in a very multicultural church. But same token, it was in McLean, Virginia, 2 of them. And there was a certain level of education and income as well that we shared. So I shared these biblical values, hard work, respect for one another. Those are American values, but they're American values. Why? Because they're biblical values first, because that's what America was founded on. Can't deny that. So you can argue Thomas Jefferson was a deist or a theist. Go ahead, argue it all day long. That's like one of the biggest arguments from, more liberal-minded people. But the bottom line is he still founded his beliefs on the Bible, for sure. You're not going to, there's no evidence to show anything different against that. So, what are expectations for visitors who come here? I think a lot of politicians and people who come to this country have lost the understanding of America. They see it only from a financial gain perspective. But multiculturalism is much more. It's beautiful on one hand, but it's also very destabilizing and disastrous on the other hand when you're adding in different worldviews to a worldview on how the law is to be implemented, what laws should be implemented or made, and which, as soon as you start tampering with that, it becomes destructive. It all boils down to the United States of America and countries even in Europe and throughout the continent, both continents, determines a country's unity, stability, because there's that commonality of values. When you have people from parts of Africa, different parts of Africa, Asia, India, and you put them all in here, you say, well, what is the American value? Well, we can all agree that it's a free place, a good place, free market to make money, but that's not what governs the law. That's not what makes something illegal or right or wrong. So I think what's going to happen is, if we're not careful, you're going to end up with tribalism. You're going to have the Indian Hindus hanging out in one neighborhood, and you're no longer united. And you're going to have different Muslims in one neighborhood, Christians in the next. You could have poor people in one neighborhood, rich people, and then the rich neighborhoods always seem to have multiculturalism because they unite under the common banner of money, but that doesn't include everybody. Tribalism, by the way, you say, what is tribalism? According to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, it's the consciousness or the conscience and loyalty, especially the exaltation of the tribe about other groups, how they see them, strong group loyalty. In other words, I can tell you in Charlotte, it's just natural. People stick together. They do. Go to the Muslim neighborhood. They all live next to each other. For that matter, so, they see Indian neighborhood, they live very close to each other. When I was growing up, I remember going with my grandmother Garofalo, who never spoke any English, to the market. They said, go with Grandma, go to the market. So I went to the market. No one spoke English. I was like, wow, not offending. They didn't all speak Italian. They spoke an ancient dialect of Sicilian. That's how defined it was. And it wasn't even a supermarket. It was a market like you go in Europe. It was pretty neat experience, but that part of New York was all Italian. That being said, New York is very much like that, but the Italians assimilated many other, and I would say most other ethnicities don't and have not, like the Irish, like the German, like the Italian, have not assimilated to the degree that they did. The Muslims today, the Hindus, they are assimilating, but at a much slower pace. So when I was a little boy in New York, that's the way it was. I grew up in D.C., but I'd go back to see my family, and that's the way it went. So anyways, assimilation into American culture, adopting American values, including hard work. And we didn't take handouts. I mean, you get smacked when I was younger, but you don't see that today. Everybody takes handouts. Today, we find entire ethnic groups from poor countries. You can't blame them, right? But you shouldn't come to any. I think it's wrong from any person, American, non-American, white, black, brown, yellow. Doesn't matter what color you are. Nobody should ever go to another country and then live for free. You should go there to work hard. That's what my family did. With no desire to change in some cases because it's easier to live off the government. Why would you, if the government's giving you a total of, let's say, for example, $40,000 in provisions, why would you go get a job for $50,000? Doesn't make any sense, right? You don't have to work at all or work something under the table. And that's what happens. Furthermore, speaking of American in particular, we sometimes we find folks that refuse to assimilate, and that's a problem. But, the big question, this is a little less biblical. The next part Part 2, I'm going to get right into the Bible to address this, but I wanted to talk about religious assimilation, tribalism. Why? Because all ethnicities, we want them to adopt a Christian religion, right? That we do as a believer. We want them to have that commonality because that's what makes us united. But there's one problem, is that every country has a central dominant traditional religion, right? If you go to India, you got Hinduism. You go to China, you got Buddhism. You go to different countries that are communist, that's communism, or that's just atheism. And go on, you got animism in parts of Africa, then you have strong Christianity, way more strong than in the West in parts of Africa, and you have different parts of Africa that are Muslim, right? And it boils down to traditionals, values, and laws. But when Islam's Sharia law is seen by an American, it's American Muslims as greater than the Constitution, that can be a problem. Do you see what I'm saying? It creates a divide amongst the more serious issue that we see in the Middle East. And there's no multiculturalism in that. In India, you know what India means defined? It means country or the land of the Indies. That's what it means. And there's very little, if any, multiculturalism in many neighborhoods. And the same, is true for Japanese, Chinese. Japanese tend to assimilate much better, or much more, I should say, in American culture. But as a result, Western culture in dominant cultures are diluted by coming down to nothingness, while other cultures, they're just sticking to their own tribe. We tend to think that they're going to assimilate like everyone else. It's not happening. Anyways, I'm not here to spout on that. I'm here really because I want to get into what the Bible says in the next part 2, which I'm going to talk more about and take a deep dive into the Bible. And really, I'm going to look at the Old Testament, because I think that's going to give us, and talk about the dangers of multiculturalism, is a beautiful part and a dangerous part, and show you what it means for you and I today. The biblical view for the Christian is, well, what are we supposed to make of this? That's what I want to look at. That's the perspective I'm going to give you in the next episode. Listen, all people and cultures, we're all part of our human heritage and equally valued by God in his eyes, for sure. And politically, the Bible has more to say about respect and authority than it does specific policies, right? Theologically, though, the Bible does not support the idea that all cultures' religious ideas are equal or equally true to be treated as such. No, that's very untrue. And in the end, yes, we are to be equal in God's eyes, but God is clear that the Christian and Jewish people are not to mix their religious beliefs in the name of tribalism, multiculturalism, animism. However attractive as that may seem, that ends up with pluralism at best and leaving the Christian faith altogether at worst. So I'm going to pick that up with part 2. I know I said a lot. I gave you a lot of information. I hope this helps. Let's make sure to think about that, help form your own mind. We got to stay to the Bible. The Bible's not Western. It's not American. It started in the Middle East, folks. It's what the truth is. It's what God says. So anyways, that being said, hey, couple things. If you want to help you understand worldviews and all that, go down there, take a course called Equipped. That's right. And you can get that where else? Hey, get the Equipped Basics at equippedacademy.com. Check it out. Make sure you share this with your friends. It's free. That will help us really get more upticks. And then, bam, Gancio Sinistro. You know what I always say. Hit that subscribe button. Knock that thing out. Listen, maybe Maria come out virtually. A little piece of pizza. Hola. That's Spanish, though. It's not Italian. Anyways, I say amicas. Amici, which amici is going to be friends. That's in Italian. There you go. God's blessings to you. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Steve Garofalo. We'll see you at the next episode. This is your Reason for Truth for today.